Hello and welcome to our communication special webinar series called Sanchar.next. Today's topic of discussion is whether COVID-19 has proven to be a lifesaver in disguise for the print industry or not. Starting with a big thanks to our sponsor Communicate India, a 360 degrees brand solutions and PR firm which handles clients across verticals like HR, corporate, health, real estate, and lifestyle. I am Rahul Puri, editor of Agency Reporter, and joining me today on this discussion are Neeraj Jha, who is head corporate communications at HDFC Bank. Known to be a thought leader in the media and communication space, in his own words, Neeraj is a guardian of corporate reputation and brand image and has in-depth knowledge of organizational ethics, customer service, and legal issues. R. Sukumar, editor of Hindustan Times. He co-founded one of the most respected and awarded newsroom in the country, Mint, in 2006 and was its editor for 9 years. Akshara Lalwani, founder of Communicate India. She's a communications connoisseur, first of her kind, who has worked across 20 sectors with over 350 companies, personally refining her craft to create the new order in marketing and communications. A reminder for you all is that a recorded version of this webinar will also be available for next few days, pinned to our YouTube and social media channels. It will always be available on our website, agencyreporter.com, in the editor's take section. Now, without further ado, I'll turn the time over to Akshara, who will be moderating the session and has some really interesting questions to ask. Over to Akshara.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rahul. First of all, I'd love to thank Neeraj and Sukumar for doing this. I mean, there's so many questions that everybody has from the walks of other brands, communication professionals, experts, research experts. So I really thank you for doing this. I'm going to make this a bit free-flowing and candid. So just a couple of things, there've been a couple of reports, Sukumar and Neeraj, I'm going to ask you both individually this question, talking about, the transmission of the virus through newspapers, and people are choosing to consume information via e-papers. But, like food deliveries continue to happen. The communications industry is seeing a learning there. And I mean, you had both the digital as well as the print edition, if I know correctly. I'd love for you to throw some light on where do you think you'd be spending your time? Where do you think the future lies? Provide some depth to that.
First of all, I think there is obviously nothing to this. You can call it rumor, you can call it fear, you can call it paranoia about the virus being transmitted to the newspaper. I don't think there has been any recorded instance of this happening anywhere in the world. And I'm not even speaking about India, right? I mean,
absolutely.
There are a million ways in which you can get infected. And the chances of getting infected by the newspaper are infinitesimally small, right? I mean, so it's, but it's one of those fears, and people are obviously not comfortable with. So, rather than berate them about it, I think you have to respect choices, right? Especially at a time like this when you have something as frightening as COVID. People have the right to choose what they want to do and what they don't want to do, what they want to consume, they don't want to consume. Our newsroom's always been very clear that we are a newsroom, right? I mean, we are not a newspaper. So we put out content. We put out content across a variety of platforms. We do podcasts. We do videos. Our stories are carried on the web almost instantly, right? The minute they are filed. And then, of course, we do in-depth, long-form explainers, stories, graphics. Everything else gets carried digitally, also gets carried in print. So I think at this point in time, what people are looking for is really reliable information, credible information, information that they can trust. Everyone is looking for, people are in information overload mode, right? They want to consume everything they can get on the virus. They want to know everything that's happening anywhere in the world. They want to know about the latest scientific discoveries or developments that have happened with respect to the coronavirus disease. They want to know what the new rules and regulations are, because since March 25th or even a little before that, we've had the government also in overdrive in terms of releasing a series of guidelines and then issuing clarifications on what is allowed and what is not allowed, and what people should do. And since May 3rd, as you know, there's been a little opening up of, much more opening up of the economy. Some of the businesses have started operating, more activities are being permitted. So there is a lot of news you can use that people need. And we see our job as giving them all this information on all the platforms that they can consume. And it's also the other important thing, and this is the most important thing as far as I'm concerned. What this particular crisis has highlighted is the fact that there is a lot of fake news also out there, right? I mean, there are a lot of misleading reports. There is a lot of fake signs out there. There are people trying to sell snake oil as a cure for this. And our job is to sort of deal with all that and to give people the correct information, to tell them what the facts are, to give them accurate data, to help them analyze the data better, because it's very, very easy to get taken in by something that you saw on WhatsApp or something else that you saw on one of the other social media platforms and believe that
Correct.
You know how it is, especially in India, right? I mean, I think it's a fact all over the world. But suddenly, I can't understand why most Indians are very intelligent, right? I mean, they're fairly smart people. I mean, they might not, even people who've just managed to finish school have a tremendous, have a high level of native wit. They're very, very smart when it comes to a lot of things, but they are not smart at all when it comes to things like WhatsApp messages that they get which say, this is happening, and you know, I think Neeraj might have also been exposed to this simply because, right, I mean, if you're a company, you just don't have to deal with the formal media, so to say. You have to deal
Correct.
with this big beast out there where anything can be said about your company, anything can be said about something that is happening, and people are more than happy and more than willing to believe it.
Absolutely.
And I think our job in a newsroom like Hindustan Times, which has 95 years of heritage and legacy and journalistic process behind it, is to sort of demolish all those things and to give people the facts.
Fantastic. And Neeraj, just borrowing from that, you know, I think, you know, being a brand custodian of one of the legacy brands in the country, you know, it's a huge responsibility dealing with the issue of fake news, also having so many different outlets, you know, whether it's podcast, digital, print, you know, where do you see you'd be investing your bucks, Neeraj? I mean, a question, where do you think, you know, where your spends, where your attention, where your focus is going, and how are you also being able to handle this fake news that Sukumar very rightly spoke about? You know, must be a huge brand challenge, you know, in many ways.
You know, so I'll tell you, we'll continue to investing, buying Hindustan Times, Times of India, and Economic Times, and whatnot. You know? These are sources, authentic sources of news. Now the problem is, suppose there's something that's broken up in the social space just now. Now between now and the next day's paper, this 8-10 hours is something that I need to be worried about, because by then the whole world's, you know, like Sukumar said, the whole world's dying to believe this. By then everybody would have believed it. So you need to have presence on social media, like I have a little bit of presence on social media, and you need to be trying to nip it in the bud. And again, in tomorrow's newspaper, you know, like Sukumar said, these people are trained, they just do this for a living. So tomorrow's newspaper is what people will read and then they'll believe. But this 5, 6, 8 hours, depending on what time it's broken on social media, is something that we need to be really worried about. And, you know, last so many crises that we would have, had to face, small or big. Most of these would have, we would have had to, fight from social media handles first. Media is not a problem. So the traditional media is not a problem, because we know that we're in safe hands. Journalists do not write anything that they feel like. So there are multiple layers. Even if I don't like you, you know, the
Right.
journalist that doesn't like me, my face, you know, he can't just write about this. Ultimately, it reaches Sukumar's level, right? So there are multiple layers. You're absolutely safe as long as you're being dealt with by a journalist. Organized media. The problem is social media. Everybody has an opinion, and everybody's, like Sukumar said, everybody's willing to believe whatever is being said about a large brand. Did I answer your question? So we would continue to invest in reading newspapers, authentic news, you know, and that's it. Social media, you need to have a presence. Actually, I'm sorry. Social media, you need to have a presence for the reason that I just explained to you. You need to be there, but the whole your customers are there. You need to be able to talk to them, you know, and also sometimes, you know, nip these things in the bud.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's you know, so important because there's so much of fear mongering going on, so much of confusion. I think you know, like Sukumar said, that there is no truth to the fact that the virus is being communicated, but this is all WhatsApp fear mongering. Or like you said, a brand manager, you said that as a brand custodian, you continue investing in print. Of course, everybody knows the digital and different formats of news consumption and authentic consumption is going to be the future. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to go to authentic bodies like Hindustan Times, etc.
100%. You know, one area that perhaps we still don't have an answer to is the WhatsApp. Correct. You know, so something that finds a way inside WhatsApp once, and then there's no stopping. So that's an area perhaps we don't. I don't still have an answer to. We're still finding out. You know, the same channel that this rumor has reached you, you should be able to send your counter argument or your clarification through the same channel. If we're able to do this, nothing like that. There's nothing that moves faster than WhatsApp. There's nothing. It's 100% coverage.
But you know what I found very, very interesting was you know, what as communication professionals, and you know, and Sukumar and Neeraj, I'll tell you this as a communications professional. I got a call from a client the other day and said, you know, we've invented a medical test, etc. And you know, we want to get this in the news, and this is really relevant for COVID. And you know, I mean, it becomes very responsible for each one of us. You know, Neeraj, you as a brand custodian, Sukumar, you as an editor, we as a communications professional to do our due diligence. You know, because what happened is someone carried it. And I'm not going to go into newspapers and the brand because that's absolutely unfair. But the problem was that how much of due diligence and what role can we do in each of our roles? You know, Neeraj, you in your place, Sukumar, you in your place, to ensure that consumer interest at large is protected. You know, I'd love to hear both your thoughts on this.
See, I think at the end of the day, especially in a situation like this, but at any point in time, right? I mean, one of the things that you should really do is, irrespective of whether you're writing about a company or a disease or a political development, it's very, very important, journalism 101, to get your facts right, to present them in the right context. And more so in a situation like this, and this is the tricky part, when you're writing about something like related to the coronavirus disease, when you're writing about the test and everything else, you need to understand the science. When someone is giving you numbers, you need to understand the math behind it. And so newsrooms need to have that expertise to do this. And many newsrooms do, right? I mean, Neeraj knows this. You look at some of the financial newsrooms, you look at Mint, you look at Economic Times, you look at Business Standard, you look at even digital entities like Bloomberg Quint or Bloomberg. Extremely good people work in these newsrooms. And when they are analyzing a company like Neeraj's company, they are unlikely to go out and say irresponsible things because they are smart guys. They understand the finances. They understand how finance works and things like that. So when you're dealing with a subject like science, when you're dealing with a subject like public health, it's even more important that you have people with the right expertise. And by the right expertise, I'm not saying you need to have people who have an MBBS degree or an MD degree working in the newsroom, because that is not going to be possible. But you need to have journalists who have domain expertise, who have covered this area for years, and who understand science, who understand math, who understand public health, who understand health policy, and who are then able to present it in the right context. Because more than anything else, even if these people don't know the actual nitty-gritties of what is there. They will know what questions to ask. Right? I mean, people who have
Right.
basic experience in an area will know what does it do, how does it work, and these are basic questions that you need to ask when it comes to a scenario like this. And I think, see, the good thing is a lot of responsible companies will never try to put out information which is half-baked. Responsible companies rarely go out and make claims that are not true. Because large companies will never do that, right? I mean,
Correct.
they're not going to go out and mislead the public because they know that the dangers of doing so are huge. I mean,
Yeah, I mean that's where I'm going to reserve my thought, because I mean, of course, big companies are going to be much more responsible, but we've seen sometimes where companies have sort of put out information, which may not be in the best interest of the consumer. And I'm saying, and we understand it. Those are not long-term viable companies. They're not. I mean, I know where you're coming from, Sukumar, and that becomes a very important question for Neeraj, as being at the helm of these responsible companies. You've had counterparts like, ICICI, Yes Bank having their own issues and challenges. And I'm not asking you to comment on that, please. I'm not going down that rabbit hole at all. But I'm saying, how do you think it's your responsibility, Neeraj, to ensure that the larger sentiment of the consumer is protected, and you're that brand custodian there putting that information out with great people like Sukumar, key editors, etc. There has to be that trust over there. So what would you say is important for corporate communications professionals as yourself to keep in mind, and your learnings?
No, I think Sukumar answered it beautifully. I mean, we need to be responsible, and most companies, most corporates, I would like to believe that they're responsible in what they communicate and how they communicate. End of the day, there's very heavy price to pay. I mean, if you lie once, it's very, very heavy price to pay. Most companies I would expect to be extremely responsible and conscious of this. As we go along, perhaps I'll have examples to share with you, and I will.
Fantastic. And just to give you an example, Sukumar, you've been at the pioneer of interesting formats. You've obviously gone different from hiring people who may not necessarily have a journalism background, bringing in diversity there. You've been pioneered a lot of things. So I just wanted to say, do you see any new formats, any new suggestions to people entering the space of news creation, etc.? Any learnings of new things and novel things and innovation coming in? What do you think, would be there going forward?
No, I think the one trend that you're going to see in general in terms of people skills, which we pretty much see everywhere else, is there used to be a time when you get away, and that time is gone. Irrespective of what you're covering in journalism, you need to be a specialist. It could be sports, it could be politics, it could be economics, it could be health, it could be energy, it could be transport. I mean, irrespective of what you cover, you need to really have that expertise, because increasingly, I think what has happened in journalism, and both you and Neeraj know this a lot better than I do, is that sure, the masthead and the brand matters, right? So Hindustan Times, HindustanTimes.com matters, but there are also individual journalism brands, right? I mean, there are people who are experts in banking, there are people who are experts in health, and these are people whose names have a following, right? I mean, when they write, irrespective of which newsroom they work for, people read what they say and they respect what they say, and that's because there's that expertise. And I think you're increasingly beginning to see that even in young people, right? I mean, there are young journalists in this country, people in their 20s who've already managed to build a following for themselves, and they've managed to build a following for themselves not because they subscribe to a certain ideology or they amplify a certain ideology, but because they have expertise in an area, and everyone respects someone who is able to explain things well, who's able to write about or speak about something authoritatively, because I think all of us want to learn, especially when it comes to a complex issue, right? I mean, it could
Right.
be something banking where or finance where most of the issues are complex, right? I mean, how do you find good journalists who can explain that? But it could also be science, it could be health, it's even politics, right? I mean, how do you explain what happens in an election, why someone won, why someone lost? Will you be able to tell people why there is an agrarian crisis in this country, right? I mean, go to the nub of it, and as a journalist, here's why you have a crisis which is going on in this particular sector. And I think that is what I would probably recommend. You can't afford to be a generalist. You can start off as one, but you'll rapidly have to figure out what you are interested in, what you are good at. And see, the good thing is, how do you learn? You learn by, one, you learn by reading, but you also learn by meeting lots of people. I mean,
Right.
you meet so many people in, um, uh, right? I mean, I've worked with banking editors who know more about banks than some of the bank CEOs I've met. And the reason they, I used to have a former colleague in Mint, who Tamal Bandyopadhyay, and Tamal is like, I mean, Neeraj knows him, right? Tamal is like an institution in banking. The guy knows more about banking than anyone else. So I remember once we had to do a future scenario planning exercise as part of these offsites, as where would each one of us be 10 years from now. And for Tamal, I said, you're going to be Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of India, right? I mean, because you know so much about banking that at some point in time. And he doesn't have a background in banking. It's not as if he worked in a bank.
It's just the opposite. In fact, it's just the opposite.
Yeah, it is completely the opposite. So he just picked it up and he's become very good at it. And I think that is probably the model that a lot of people will have to follow.
Fantastic. And Neeraj, what do you think lies ahead for, the new crop of agencies in IPOs and, in BFSI agencies? What worked 30 years ago is not going to work now. So, your learnings, your recommendations, your advice for people entering the space, trying to innovate in the space, what do you think, are your recommendations and learnings?
It's a very broad question. When you say agency, you meant the PR agencies, right?
PR agencies, largely that.
It's a broad question. The one thing that matters most, in my opinion, is the the credibility. I mean, whatever you do, like it matters for a journalist, for a publication house. It matters for a PR professional. In fact, I don't like this word PR because the way it's got practice in India, nothing wrong.
Yeah, let's just look at it broader. Let's look at everybody who's working with communications in the space.
Like Sukumar touched upon this subject, you need to be a specialist even here.
Right.
So whether you're representing a brand or you're part of a brand like I am, I have to know as much about the bank, the way it functions, different aspects, the regulation, the laws that govern it. Then perhaps I'm doing justice to my position. It's no longer enough to say that I know half a dozen journalists. Even if I know Sukumar, he'll not stop taking my calls after third call if I'm not making sense to him. If I'm just a marriage maker, if I'm just a phone call fixer, then I think I'm dead. So you need to know as much, because at the end of the day, you're dealing with journalists who are so well read, so well traveled. For instance, all my friends who cover banking, they know, as I totally agree with Sukumar, they know as much banking perhaps as a banker does. So when you're in the business of dealing with them, you must try and acquire knowledge. You must try and know things. You can't just say, let me come back to you. And, seldom we come back. There is a call from the media, and I'm looking at my phone, and I know this show. I'm anticipating the question, the call, what this call would be about, and I'll not take this call. And I'll send a text saying, let me call you back. If I have ended up making the mistake of taking this call, then I'll say, can I call you back, sir? And I never call you back. That is how it's got practiced so far. That needs to change. You must be confident of who you are. You must be confident of what you do in the organization. And you must try and have answer to 90% of the questions that are landing at your phone, at your desk. I'm not here to just say, let me come back and I just find out and come back to you. That's it. That's one message that I would like to give to all youngsters who are trying to get into this, profession. It's a beautiful profession. But I'm saying it's a little more serious than what people trying to give credit to it. And we are ourselves to blame.
Oh.
We're ourselves to blame. I'm doing law now, not because I didn't have anything else to do in life.
Incredible.
Right? So I went to Colombia not because I had that money. I could have bought a flat in a small, smaller town outside of Bombay. So when you know what you're here to do, then you must try and work towards it, skill yourself, invest in some of these things. That's something, that I would like to tell my young friends.
Fantastic. And, just from other brand custodians, across the board, advertising, media buying, other brand heads are sort of asking, what is the consumer, everyone's spoken about it. Amazon's spoken about how the customers are the heart of everything we do. What are the customer consumption pattern trends you all both are seeing, both from the HDFC point of view, also from the editorial point of view? If you all could delve a little bit into that, what do you think is the consumer really looking for? I was earlier doing a call with someone in the digital space, and people said who's consuming political news may not want to consume tech news. So, is that the way going into more targeting of what the consumer really wants? Sukumar, I mean, are there novel products coming out, and what do you think is the consumer really looking for? And then Neeraj, I'd love to hear from you.
See, I think from the targeting point of view, our job is largely done by technology, right? I mean, and at the consumer end, I'm sure you know exactly what kind of information you're looking for and where to find it, because technology has made that discovery possible. From our perspective, what we've realized is that you can't hold back news, right? I mean, there used to be a certain time cycle for news. For newspapers, it was 24 hours. For magazines, it was 7 days. Now everything is real time. And it's not just that you can give them the news and they'd be happy with it. They want the news, they want the analysis, they want the data pieces, they want the long form pieces, they want the opinions, and they want everything right then. Because what we're increasingly seeing is consumers are dipping into media, right? I mean, it's like a meeting where there is a big bowl of popcorn in the middle of the table, and it's not as if it goes around and everyone takes a few at a piece. People just keep dipping into it. So through the day, people keep dipping into news, and it could well be that you publish something in the morning and people see it only in the evening, but the fact is you can't hold anything back. I think news has become a continuum and people are looking at it. Now within that, the only two things that are important for us are the credibility and the authoritativeness with which you can put out stuff that people believe, and the ability of the newsroom to actually develop voices, right? You need to have I know I've made this point before. Like for instance, I remember when the 4G licensing happened and the pricing happened in India. I used to be in Mint then, and my analyst did a fabulous piece, right? I mean, he wrote a very nice piece which we carried on the website, in the paper, and everything else. But I read an even better piece online, which was actually done by someone who works for one of the tech companies who posted it on LinkedIn, right? I mean, it was not on any platform, but the thing is, on Medium, on LinkedIn, you will find these experts who are actually putting that information out. And because discovery is now possible, those pieces have the ability to reach as much of an audience in terms of volume as anything being put out by the Hindustan Times newsroom. So I think we have to be aware of that. Sets a very high bar. You can't just say like, okay, we are Hindustan Times, so you can get by with doing shoddy stuff because, we have tremendous reach. Because the choice before the consumer is so much sharper now. And I guess in its own way, that poses a challenge to everyone, right? I mean, I'm sure it poses its own challenge to Neeraj too.
100%. LinkedIn is, in fact, all these platforms have been a discovery, and we're working really, we're investing time and money in trying to, leverage them, because end of the day, a newspaper will have 16 pages. And these are, going to be filled with, the choicest or the best, for the day. Now, I may have something to say on that today. And Hindustan Times, for instance, may not have space. Can I leverage, build on my own platforms? Can I bring my audiences on my platform? And can I try and push out something what Kumar was saying? We've been toying with this. With reasonable success, I would say. End of the day, I'm very confident. We'll have a captive audience. When I say captive audience, means across my followers across the bank website, bank Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram, right? And then I'm putting out this content. It may be an interview of somebody, let's say, a level below Mr. Puri. Now, Mr. Puri is a star. I mean, whenever I want to go to the media, I mean, he's a star. I mean, he gets you. He's there on front page. Everybody's not him.
Correct.
Then what do? I can keep on churning out press releases. I can keep on, holding press conferences. That's, in my opinion, is unwise. So build your own properties, build your own content and put it out. And we have done this with reasonable success, I would say. So I totally agree with Kumar. So I'm so glad. I mean, he also sees this as a competition. Now, let's say corporate banking head. Now, if he puts out something, now today we are the dilemma is, how much do I need to put out? What should he not say? What should I hold back for an Economic Times interview? What should I hold back for a Mint interview? Otherwise, there's nothing. I can do a full-fledged Q&A, put it out on LinkedIn, and spend some money, and ensure that it's reached all corners. That's one option that we do have, all companies have. What I do not have is the authenticity. But I do not have the brand equity of an Hindustan Times, or a Times of India, or an Economic Times. But I'm saying this journey is on. My reliance on the...
And a lot of portals, Suku. Sure.
Sorry, no, my reliance...
Continue.
My reliance on the major, sources, brands of news cannot be, too much for my own discomfort. There are times when I have to say something and I don't have anybody to go to. I mean, crisis is different, right? When you're trying to manage a crisis, when you have something to say in your defense, rest assured everybody will write. But I've got something positive. I want to write, the media to write about it. I may not always get that space. Then what do? I'll try these things. I'll shoot a video of my corporate banking head or my risk head, put it up on my website, and then I use all my, might and, to promote it across all digital channels that I have at my disposal. Makes sense?
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's
and I've got 200,000 employees. I've got 200,000 employees. Each employee has 100, on an average, I would say, will have 100 followers across this Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram and Facebook. See, if I have managed to, leverage this, multiply that 200,000, it's a large number.
Exactly.
Most papers won't have this kind of reach.
Exactly.
And then I have my wife's WhatsApp group. Yeah.
Fantastic. That will have the most reach.
Absolutely. WhatsApp is
fantastic. No, it is. And that brings me to the question, I mean, of course, as Hindustan Times, there are large fixed costs, there's a whole plethora of journalists, salaries, print, infrastructure costs, etc. And then, it's always been a challenge of doing the right thing in native advertising and striking that balance, as a brand, getting the true voice out there and also making sure that, it's done in a right way. So, I mean, what are your views on native advertising, Sukumar? Do you, and any words of caution there, any learnings that you're seeing?
No, I mean, it's very, very simple, right? I mean, the only two things, I'm all for native advertising, except for two things. You need to have proper labeling and you need to have complete disclosure. As long as the labeling and the disclosure are fine, native advertising is fine. The only key that I would have there is I think a lot of Indian companies are on a learning curve when it comes to native advertising. Because if you look at many of the multinationals and many of the companies overseas, I think they have a fairly good understanding of native advertising, and they don't, for want of a better word, plug themselves too much, right? I mean, there is, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of these
Right.
case studies, right? I mean, what New York Times did with Orange is the New Black, the kind of articles that came out related to that, which really, even today, is held up as a case study on how native advertising should be done. And I think, but that's a learning curve. I think as a newsroom, the important thing for us to do is to insist on that labeling and disclosure. And I think in the long run, the good brands realize that, right? Because it's about protecting the sanctity of the brand, and it's not just protecting the sanctity of my brand, right? I mean, it's also about protecting the sanctity of every brand that advertises in me. And I think the good brands realize that. The brands that don't realize that are probably not worth it, because they're not going to be around for the long term, right? I mean, they're just not going to be worth it.
Absolutely. Neeraj, would there be anything you'd like to add there? Your views on native advertising, any new forms, advertising in general, lots of brands want to do advertorials, they want to go on listicles, they want to be in the face. What's your sense? I mean, what's the tonality, the voice, the expectations that you think are imperative?
I don't know. I mean, I'll give you an honest answer, and it's something that, very, very honest. I'm saying, editor of Sukumar's stature, I don't think he should even be made to talk this, use this word. I mean, he should just be focusing in what he does best. Things aren't in what they were, let's say, 15 years back. If editors were allowed to concentrate and focus on the expertise that they bring in, it's tremendous. Bringing out a newspaper is not easy. And then you have a team that, that is able to sell this product. A newspaper sells not on the strength of advertisement. It sells because what it writes. That's the vehicle. If they don't stop writing, show me one newspaper with 16 pages of advertisement. How many times would you buy it tomorrow?
I can show you. I'm not going to get into names, but I'm saying there's some newspapers.
I know which paper you're about to name. You don't name. I'm saying, but a full 16 pages of advertisement, nobody will buy. Most people would buy a newspaper because it's what's written there. And then you can perhaps intersperse, it makes sense because that's a way. It's sold, people buy it because of the content, serious content that it's putting out. It's a very serious job what journalists do. It's a very serious job what Sukumar does. So I'm saying if the two are kept separate and both are allowed to do what they do best, find your own way of selling this newspaper. I mean, that's what my reply to this question is. I'm sorry if I hurt your sentiments, but that's how I would want it to be. Most CEOs today, they say, has it appeared in Hindustan Times? Has it appeared in the Times of India? Online is fine. But the real endorsement is when these guys write about it. So it's as serious as this. So don't belittle it by mixing it up with, when editors talk about this, I don't think they are not even trained to do this. You're trying to make them into a businessman, which they are not.
No, absolutely.
You want to remove this part, you please remove. But I seriously mean, editorship is a very serious job. It's a very, very serious job.
No, and like I said, I wanted to have these candid, honest conversations because, newspapers are an essential service. This is how everybody gets credible news. It has infrastructure costs, it has costs. So native advertising is nothing wrong, advertorials is nothing wrong, but how do you get it right?
To the extent it helps you sustain yourself, it shouldn't be the predominant, it shouldn't be the only factor. I was reading New York Times today, the subscriptions have gone up. 80% of that because of, it has been on account of the news. So people have subscribed to New York Times, 80% of them because of the news is providing. Maybe it's COVID or something else. Rest is the balance. People there is still massive appetite for serious news, massive appetite for authentic views, right? So there's no question of demand. I mean, that was a topic perhaps. There is no, in my opinion, there is no dearth of demand for a newspaper. There is no dearth for demand for authentic news and news. In Bombay, 13 lakh,
Fantastic.
13 lakh
Yeah.
copies Times of India sells, and Hindustan Times about 10 lakh, 9 lakh. The population of the city is 1.5 crore. I don't think this number, I don't see this number changing. So 10% of our population is still, want serious news. They want to read the editorial. They want to read everything else. And also some bit of advertising. Newspaper's job is to inform me. And information can come, it can be in different
Absolutely.
forms, including, a neighborhood store if they have something good to say to me, right? So I'll look at that advertising too. That's the market, and
Fantastic. I really,
I don't think that market is going to change in the Corona, no Corona.
no, absolutely. Like you said, I mean, 13 lakh, 9 lakh, look at the population. I mean, there's massive demand. Maybe there's dynamic pricing structures where essential news, paid paywalls, etc. Maybe something that has a huge amount of potential,
So that's a different debate. I mean, Los Angeles Times,
Yeah.
they raised their issue price by 6 times. On an average, American newspapers have raised their price almost like 2.5 times in the last 10, 15 years. Has that happened in India? I don't know. So, that's a different debate. I mean, we can have that debate.
Absolutely.
It's a totally different debate. But I'm saying there's no dearth, there's no, absence of demand. Still, people need, serious.
That's true. There is a huge demand for good, high quality, credible news and information.
Absolutely.
And that's not going to go away.
That's not going to go away, no matter what.
Fantastic. I think this is such an interesting time. I think
if I can add here something,
yes.
Akshara, I'm so sorry. When
Yes.
I've traveled to most of these owners and met the owners of these, regional, powerhouses, right? I won't name them, but I've traveled to them, met them in their offices. When I meet them, there is nothing to suggest that, there is any financial trouble that they're in. So I don't think it's the funding is an issue. I don't think even, readership is an issue. When I come from a small town called Ranchi. So when I go there from 6 to 9, you finished your 3 cups of tea. You finished your, reading your all 16 pages of one paper. There are 3 papers lying in front of you, and you read each paper one by one. By 9 o'clock, the entire family has taken turns to read the newspaper, which means there is demand. They want to read.
Absolutely.
Right? What changes when it come to cities like Bombay and Delhi, where there's so much of, the paucity of time, right? I'm having to fit in everything in the 9 hours, and I have to get into the car by 8. Then I can't read. Then I'll do something. All these are innovations that we have started to experiment with only when, after having come to the, this super life in metros. Otherwise, if I have time, I would still prefer flipping through the 16 pages of a Mint or a Times of India or an Hindustan Times.
No, absolutely. And like I said, these are the conversations we want to have, and that's why I love having, I'm so grateful that you and Sukumar took this time out to bust these myths, answer these questions as credible sources, brand custodians, an editor. So, before we wrap up, because I wanted to ask any of you, is there anything else, any feedback, any sort of learnings you'd like to give, any advice that you'd like to impart to audience in the brand marketing space? Is there anything that you'd like to share? And, before we close the session, and, you guys have shared some phenomenal learnings, and I really appreciate you being so candid.
See, from the brand perspective, and we deal with a lot of people, right? I mean, in my previous avatar, I used to deal with a lot of companies, people like Neeraj, and I think the important thing across levels is you need to focus on 2 or 3 things, and the first one is you need to be able to communicate what's happening in your domain very well if you're a brand person to the journalist, to the newsroom. I'm not sure that I'm seeing it in a lot of people, especially junior people who come in, don't have that information, that ability to know what's happening in their industry, and they're not able to explain it. It's what Neeraj put, right? I mean, the ability to anticipate questions and to say like, okay, these are the kind of issues that are going to be raised, and I need to have answers for them instead of just saying, I'll get back to you. Because if you get back to you, eventually you'll get bypassed and people will go straight to someone who's got the information. And the best communicators are people who reach out to you, and when you ask them a question, they give you an
Right.
answer, which needs that. The second thing, and this is again, it's true of communication, but it's true of a lot of things. I think relationships are very important because those are the relationships build trust, they build confidence. Um, so that you should be that way. If I need to check something about a company, or I need to find something about anything, it could even be a political party, should be able to pick up the phone, speak to someone responsible who I know will give me the accurate information, who will not spin, who will not lie, who will be truthful, and tell me this is exactly what is happening, right? I mean, it could be on record, it could be off record, but the fact is you need to have that relationship. And it's not just from my side. I think it's important even from the communicator side to have that kind of relationship, so that you can pick up the phone and speak to someone and say, listen, this is happening, and we are putting out this, or I do get these calls from a variety of people saying like, you must have seen this happening in the news, and this is exactly what has happened. We thought we should let you know. With no The best communicators are not people who push you into writing something, right? I mean, they give you all the facts, they give you all the answers, and then you pretty much make up your own mind, and you write it, which again is something that I think a lot of younger people in the business need to learn. It's not because there the tendency would tend to be that, listen, this is what we have, and we think you should focus on this particular thing, which doesn't make sense, because at the end of the day, the only person I'm interested in is my reader, right? I mean, I'm
Of course.
interested in anything that I write, or anything that the newsroom puts out across platforms, will at the end of the day have to be from the perspective of the reader. It has to be from the perspective of the people. For instance, in Mint, I always used to say this, right? I mean, Mint is all for free markets and free people. And those are the only two things that we are worried about. We are not particularly worried about catering to any other agenda. And I think the smarter communicators recognize that.
Fantastic. No, that's great. Neeraj, is there anything that you would love to share with other brand counterparts, other professionals, anything that you'd like to add to?
Nothing much. I mean, it's like I said, all my counterparts, my peers in other companies, they've done well for themselves. And, I don't know. It's like, again, I mean, you need to take your job seriously. Know as much as you can about the brand that you represent. Be ready to answer most of your questions, if not all. There are questions that you may not want to answer. That's something else, but you can't afford not to know. But you must know, and have relationships, and relationships, help. And I cannot agree more with Sukumar. In fact, we are a living example. We don't ever, call up, journalists, and then sell a story. We have never understood this word called spin. Whenever there is a story, so it helps. Everybody in my team here in the bank is a journalist. Everybody, it's an all journalist team that I have. How it helps, let me take a minute and explain to you. So the reporter will write, and I am here behind him. The reason why I don't have to waste my time trying to sell him a story, because I understand he will write what he wants. I understand that he is writing for his readers, not for me. If he has to write for me, then we'll have to hire him, and make him part of the bank. So he'll write for his story. Now you need to understand what is story. If you're a journalist, if you've been a reporter, you understand this. So I don't make unreasonable calls to media ever. I mean, we'll not ever call, say, don't do the story. We'll call up. We have to do this much. The misreporting doesn't happen. We don't end up getting the undue and unnecessary, undeserved, bad publicity. So we'll call up, give our side, and that's where it ends. We never force, don't do this, please. And journalists are all smart. They're all very intelligent, unbiased. Most journalists, they don't have bias. Even if somebody has a bias against me, for instance, he doesn't like my face, he can't write because he's got a boss sitting up there, upstairs in Sukumar and others. So there is the entire system takes care of that. You need to be a professional. You need to know your job. Let the journalists do theirs. And I think it's a perfect, you can work in tandem. Perfect.
Fantastic. Well, I love this conversation. Thank you for doing this. Sharing your knowledge with peers. I think that's what makes everybody get better from masterminds as yourselves. And, Rahul, it's over to you.
Super rich discussion, Akshara. You really pulled a good one.
Yeah, but the future of print is still undebated. I was like charged up to talk about this great future of print.
We'll use LinkedIn for that.
We did not talk about the future of print at all.
You've got one of
the
the
future
best.
of print is very bright. We're just busting the myths here. That's all we're doing.
Absolutely. We've got one of the best print editors with us. So, I'm absolutely confident that that's assured. No matter who says, no matter what number you look at, print is here to stay.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this conversation provides so much of invaluable depth to it. And, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for taking out time from your busy schedules for joining us today.
Thank you.
Appreciate you all being here. See you next time.
Thank you. Thanks, Rahul. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.